Now, Jamie, we were told that we were going to be now living with COVID. Case numbers are higher than ever before. While some people are testing positive, maybe asymptomatic and not doing anything about it, there still seems to be an impact. I mean, certainly the headlines today are suggesting that. So what do you think it's going to look like going forward? Is this it? Is this what we've become?
Well, no, I don't think it's going to be like we've got at the moment forever, Alex. I think we're in that kind of period where the government have dropped all of the legal requirements to self-isolate, but there's been kind of millions and millions of lateral flow tests built up over the last 6 to 12 months, and people are still doing a lot of lateral flow tests. They stopped becoming free on Friday, and if you look at what the government issued, I think a few days ago, they updated the number of symptoms that people may have if they've got COVID. They're so wide-reaching that a lot of people may think that they've got COVID, but going forward, I think there are probably people you've done the reports you were looking at there in terms of public services or airports and things. People are probably self-isolating now because they've done a lateral flow test that's come back positive. Whereas in the past, they might have similar symptoms and would have gone to work because they would have thought it was as a cold. So I think the important thing is that whilst we got high numbers of infections, and they are actually highest if you look at the ONS figures in Scotland, where they still have masks in some places there, I think as we go forward, we are seeing that fewer and fewer people will self-isolate if they test positive, or they won't know they'll test positive in the future, Alex, because there'll be no testing available for them.
Well, here's my question about that. What we know, what we think we know, is that COVID has mutated to become far more transmissible, as viruses often do. Yes, people are potentially having lateral flows and staying off work, but a great deal of the population may not be doing that. But does this therefore require us to just keep on having booster after booster after booster to prevent the so-called strain on the NHS, where people might get very ill from this?
Well, the stories you see, Alex, about rising numbers of patients in hospital, you've got to look underneath the key headlines on that, in that we're actually seeing that the vast majority of patients in hospital now test positive on admission, and they're not the primary reason for being admitted is COVID. And the number of patients who are seriously ill in hospital, so in kind of your critical care and ventilated beds, that's hardly moved at all. So if we're going to continue to test, and they're going to test patients as they go in, we're not seeing a huge strain of COVID causing that extra problem. It does cause an issue if obviously staff are off sick and they can't provide that care, which does have that impact. In terms of the booster rollouts, what we do know is that we're seeing a big rise in older patients going into hospital, and that's in part because the vaccines tend to wane after 10 to 12 weeks. So it's a success of the vaccine that they kept them out of hospital at Christmas time, but a failure of the vaccine that they need to have another one. Now, I think as we move forward, I don't think booster after booster after booster is going to be needed for everybody. We do need better vaccines that last longer. And I think we're going to get back to where we were with the flu, Alex, where you vaccinate the most vulnerable and let the rest of the population just catch this virus and let the little immune system get it over it and back to normal in a few days' time.
Now, to you, as a statistician, does this cast any retrospective light on government policy to date? Were we perhaps way too zealous and heavy-handed in the way we handled COVID? Perhaps not at the beginning, when we didn't really understand the length and breadth of it and the real risk, but certainly, over the last year or so, where there have still been a lot of regulations in place.
Well, indeed, you still got masks in place in some settings in Scotland. We've had a report out from Ofsted today, Alex, saying that young kind of children, before they even go to primary school, all the mask wearing has had an impact in terms of their learning, because they haven't been seeing kind of people's faces in those early years settings. And that's had an impact as well, which you're going to have to kind of live with. And the reports coming out of China, where they're segregating children from their parents with these stringent lockdowns, these zero COVID policies that some parts of the world have tried to kind of contain the virus over the last couple of years is clearly not working with Omicron. I think going forward, Alex, people will always call for more restrictions because some people have got used to them. Remember, some people who work in kind of in offices can work from home, but a vast majority of people actually do not work in these offices, and they're just going to need to kind of get over the fact that you can't continue to self-isolate if you've got the virus. Otherwise, we're just going to be testing and going into an isolation back and forth all of the time, and it's just not going to be tenable in the future.